This week in Pure Reinvention.
Pure Reinvention is a way to connect with people to move the needle forward on innovation, reinventing the world, I would be as bold to say, as well as collaborating on being a disruptor.
Episode 99, Greg Rokisky, social media and community manager and business consultant.
Engage, disrupt, adapt, repeat. You're listening to Pure Reinvention, the podcast for curious people.
Welcome to this episode of Pure Reinvention, where we create space for the unexpected by inspiring a reinvention lifestyle. So, Mike, we got to talk with Greg. We got to record Greg on the air, and I'm so excited because Greg is joining our Pure Reinvention team.
Isn't he a wonderful man?
Yeah.
He is one of those individuals that right away you just get a really strong sense about. I met him with your friend Jody Parker, and when I ran into him, they were actually discussing Pure Reinvention.
Isn't that funny? Karma.
It
Karma,
is.
Baby.
And because he was so engaged in what it was and why he wanted to be involved, we were able to bring him in to take advantage of his social media and community building skills. And as I am learning how the community of the future is being built, he's been a great teacher. And I think he will be a great mentor for us in helping us understand how to build what the new community is going to look like. That's going to be very, very important.
You know, Greg's one of these guys that he's talking about social and he's talking about digital and he's talking about some things that can be scary concepts to some of us who wouldn't consider ourselves tech savvy. But he does it in such a way that it's really all about this sense of community. And he said, no one wants to feel alone. And I just thought that was such a powerful statement. And it makes this whole next chapter of how we connect much less intimidating.
Well, and that's exactly right. I think the whole fact that you can build communities in many, many ways is what we'll talk about after we have our conversation with Greg. Let's listen in.
This week's episode is sponsored by Willpower Consulting. Whether it be pursuing new avenues in content delivery like podcasts or developing a sustainable content building strategy, Willpower Consulting is with you every step of the way. Get a dose of willpower at WilliamRCarlson.com or at William R. Carlson on Twitter.
Greg, welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Greg, tell me a little bit about yourself before we get into this whole thing about Pure Reinvention.
I am of the ripe age of 25. I grew up on the west side of Michigan in Grand Haven. So I grew up in Coast Guard City, Michigan, found my way to Michigan State University after I graduated high school, and then started as a human bio major, actually. Thought I wanted to be a surgeon, and then decided I didn't want to be in school for the rest of my life, and then found my way to the communications field, where I am now. And so I started at a public relations agency in downtown Lansing, learned everything I did from them, and then simultaneously kind of found my tribe in the social and digital media realm, and found that was a viable market for business. Landed a new job where I currently work as that social media and community manager for a national corporation. So the perk of that is I get to work from home, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, awesome.
And so since leaving there, I've kind of split my time working full-time for them. And then also I do some creative services consulting. And I like to call it creative services consulting instead of just social media management or graphic design, because I think businesses can afford in this new digitized age to be a little bit more innovative and forward thinking. And so I like to step in with their overall goals and mission and visions and values and kind of come at that 45-degree angle where they can offer something different.
Before we get started, of the 5 steps in the Pure Reinvention process, which step do you most closely associate yourself with?
Most definitely disrupt. I've read the Zingerman series, The Lapsed Anarchists. And so I've read those whole series. I love them. And I always recommend them to anyone. And so I've always kind of seen myself as not a rebel, but I think more of that lapsed anarchist where I hate when someone says, this is the way we've always done it. And if it's not working well and they're not really willing to open up and think of a different way to do it that might be easier for one, and definitely it might cost less, but in the end, it might be even more successful. So I've always been that disruptor in my family, in work, in the professional space, and that's kind of why I landed in this new era of working remotely and working on my own, because I'm more of my own boss most days than I like to be under the task of someone else.
Well, in Pure Reinvention, we never have enough disruptors, so welcome to the club.
Thank you.
What is your superpower?
Probably actually building a community. So I've kind of found through my love of public relations and social media, it's bringing people together. And through those channels, you can bring people together from around the world. In high school, I was always involved with student government. I was the social guy. I was trying to connect all of the different groups. And so at the end of the day, I think my real superpower is being able to bring people together, but also find the commonalities between them.
Describe a time most recently when you found yourself in an uncomfortable situation.
Probably last week, I was at a conference for digital marketing, and a lot of the attendees were C-suite executives or higher level people. And I actually ran into Seth Godin. He was the keynote speaker. And so that was a little uncomfortable because he's this world-renowned speaker who has been doing this for decades, whereas I've been doing this for half a decade now. And so we just went up to him, and I'm part of the Social Media Association of Michigan. I'm on their executive board. And I was with the president, and we walked up to Seth, and we asked him if we could hop on Facebook Live and interview him. And so he said yes, let me just put my bag down. And without being totally uncomfortable, but still having the perpetuation to ask, it wouldn't have happened. So I was definitely uncomfortable in that situation, a little intimidated, but it ended up working out.
So, Greg, when you think about building community, because to me that is a really interesting subject, how does your work help organizations build the momentum and the community, right? The customers, the community, the energy to become more successful?
That's so important, and what I do personally for organizations, associations, even individuals, everyone has a brand. And in the traditional sense, people were used to just having to communicate and reach and sell within their own neighborhood, within a couple blocks, within a couple miles. But now with the digital age, with social media, with email, with everything so abundant, the community there, you have people who you can find just through a tweet sometimes or this simple Facebook post. They see it and then they become an advocate after they do some digging, after they do some research, and then they're part of your tribe going off of Seth's kind of terminology. The easiest way to sell a product or to increase your bottom line as a brand or to achieve a goal is to find like-minded individuals around you. And through what I do through social media, it's so much easier now. You just have to, one, be open to new and possibly intimidating tactics, tools, and strategies. And then two, you have to be willing to take that leap of creativity, to have your own voice as that brand, and to also be vulnerable with people. And if you're willing and able to open up yourself to others, then they will advocate on your behalf. And this is anything. This is in politics. This is in just product marketing. If you're a influencer and you just want to get more followers on social media, just offer that extra dose of vulnerability and open yourself up. And then people will advocate for you. They'll push others to buy your book, to attend an event that you're speaking at. And I think that's the importance of community, is to build those followers.
So how did you become attracted to Pure Reinvention?
I think the first conversation was when I was speaking with Jody Parker. She was a coworker of mine at the time at the public relations agency in which I was working. And she had brought up this retreat that she went to. She had mentioned that she got on a bus and she did a tour of Detroit, and she went through all of these various stops. And at each stop, she heard a story about the Detroit reinvention and the Detroit story. And she talked about how these people were technically disruptors in that they went against the trends or the expectations or anything else that fell on their shoulders that they decided to ignore. And they created something. And really, I was at the time where the digital age, where social media, where everything was kind of new, and it still is new even right now. But the way she spoke about those disruptors and how they made a change, it really instilled the confidence in me to take a job I normally wouldn't take, working from home for a company that's been around for a while, but they are really trying to grow in the marketing space. And then 3, to go off and do my own consulting for the thing that I think would disrupt the current business economy, that businesses, if implemented, would propel them forward. And I think that's what Pure Reinvention is in all those facets. It's encouraging people to look around and go against the norm. And I think that's what the whole Pure Reinvention process is about. It's about looking at a different way to do things, reinventing yourself, your organization, your brand, and then moving forward in a new economy, in a new talent-driven workforce, and making your own mark that way.
In your opinion, how does that align with how the general economy and the general world is evolving in a way that may or may not match the Pure Reinvention philosophy?
I think we're still on the up on that hill of being on the cusp of switching from one sort of leadership ideal and ideology to this new one where it's about not just top down or bottom up. It's about this two-way street in leadership and how anything is run, like I said. So if you're a leader in anything, it doesn't even have to be a company. I think we're still focusing on some old-fashioned teachings and musings, and I think Pure Reinvention is ahead of the curve. And so if people like me or like other people out there who are questioning, are they the ones that don't fit, or are maybe they thinking in a new way, in a new mindset? I think that's where Pure Reinvention can step in and help them. And that's where it helped me. Talking to Jody, I was like, I know I'm not alone now, because there's an organization that encourages others to think how I'm thinking in terms of branching off, in terms of disrupting and moving things forward in a different space.
Talk a little bit about the feeling of being alone when you are a disruptor, and you feel like there is more to the opportunity than what is currently available.
So like I said, I worked after my time at Michigan State University in Lansing, and I live in Hazlet right now, which is just east of East Lansing. And Lansing is still, I would say, a very traditional focused market. And anything, I would say, in the beginning, when I was still at the public relations agency, people were still intimidated by the work I wanted to do. And so I was kind of that disruptor in the way of wanting to help organizations or associations or politics-driven efforts and help them propel their way forward through the trends that I was seeing, through social media, through the power of the digital age, email in a way that most people don't think of email around here. And I was just hitting a wall with a lot of individuals. And it was hard because I felt like I either had to blend in with the mold of most of the market here, or I wouldn't have a job eventually. Because sometimes as a disruptor, you feel like you can only push so much before it might be a detriment to your success.
Before it pushes back.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the reason why I believe so much in the digital space, and be that social media or email or text messaging or Facebook messaging, is because I was able to seek out like-minded individuals from around the world. I have mentors now who have become friends, and they're doing the exact same thing I was doing. So they were working in the social media space. They have social media-based companies now, and they have digital marketing only services. And that's what I wanted to do. And so I was just of the mind. I've always been of the mind. If I don't find it here, I'll look somewhere else. And through the internet and through the connectivity of the social media community, I was able to find people who helped me find a path that was right for that disruptor mindset.
So you're advocating that all of us need a community of support.
I would say yes.
Dependent upon our personality or depending on our journey. So, Greg, how does the Pure Reinvention Project help support a community of like-minded individuals in a way that begins to nurture and grow that part of someone that needs nurturing in an environment today that isn't quite as broad as we'd like to see it?
The first step with that is everyone who has spoken on this podcast has their own Pure Reinvention story. And so they fit in with one of those 5 facets. And together we tell a collective pure reinvention journey. So even if we don't know it, or if those guests haven't really reflected on that yet, everyone who has spoken on this podcast is already part of a community. And it's only going to continue to grow. So if you go on a corporate retreat, you've gone through a journey, a part of a journey together, and you're part of that community. And with all of the exciting things that I think we have planned for Pure Reinvention, especially through the digital space, that community will only continue to flourish and grow and become tighter. And I think that's so important for not only the Michigan market, but the global market as it stands now, because it's so important that we don't feel like we're alone. We want other people who are like us, who think like us, and who are of similar values of this new way of thinking. And that's what Pure Reinvention does.
So you've alluded to 2017 being the year in which Pure Reinvention starts to expand upon its community to make more availability within the community. Can you give us a little hint as to what you're forecasting?
Sure, of course. So one thing that we definitely want to do is, like I just mentioned, if you're on this podcast and then you walk away from it, and then you promote it to your friends, you share it with your family, sure. But you're part of that community, whether you know it or not. And so in 2017, we're really going to focus on those podcast guests and making sure that we continue the conversation. We idea share and we ideate. And we're going to do that through the digital space. And so we're thinking of some innovative, creative ways to connect people through social media, through email, through some written content in addition to the podcasting. And I think all of that coming together, it's just going to attract different people from different mediums for our market and kind of create that safe space for the disruptors, for the movers, for anyone that fits across the spectrum of Pure Reinvention, and bring them together. So I'm really excited. And our first step really to that is our November 3rd event for all of the first 100 podcast guests. And we're going to be taking them through the Pure Reinvention process in a different way that will be extremely excited, and I'm very much looking forward to. But in addition, we're going to be kicking off some of those next steps to continuing the community movement.
Greg, since you're one of those first 100 podcast guests, why would you as a podcast guest feel compelled to participate in this?
Well, if you look on the Pure Reinvention website and you look at past episodes and some of the amazingly talented guests that have passed through this mic before me and will continue to do so after me, the opportunities there that come from corporations, from C-suite executives to grassroots individuals who are moving and shaking right here in Michigan and who have connections globally, nationally, locally. That right there is enough of a sell to be a part of this community, because then together, maybe podcast guest number 28 works for an association management company, and I see an outlet for them to dive into the digital space. And so we connect, we collaborate, and then it's a win-win for everyone, because at the end of the day, we're moving something forward, whether it be placemaking initiatives through Michigan, whether it be conservancy efforts in Detroit, whether it be leadership, education on the corporate level. We're all winning at the end of the day.
As a last impression on the value of Pure Reinvention, what's your very short pitch to somebody about why Pure Reinvention?
I would probably say Pure Reinvention is a way to connect with people to move the needle forward on innovation, reinventing the world, I would be as bold to say, as well as collaborating on being a disruptor.
And there you have it. Greg, thank you.
Thank you.
So here we've got Greg, another disruptor. We've had quite a few disruptors in our lead up to our 100th podcast here. And I think Greg really hits on a point. Sometimes being a disruptor can be lonely, especially when you feel like you're in an environment where you're pushing and pushing, and that particular environment doesn't necessarily value change or doesn't want to hear about all of your great ideas, but you feel like you're bubbling over with them. And if you don't have someone to reach out to and say, am I crazy? Am I the only one that thinks this way? You can shut down and shut up. And that's unfortunate because that's not how reinvention happens for a company or for an individual.
I think that's exactly right. And as Greg has reminded us, because it's so important to remember that like attracts like, that if you are somewhat of a disruptor and that you're looking for more than what the traditional system is providing at this point, the whole value of pure reinvention is to allow those like-minded individuals to come together and recognize that we are not alone. Jody, you and I have felt that way, where we go into an environment and we say to ourselves, are we the only ones that see or understand or think this? And yet, it is something that others are craving to be a part of that network. And Pure Reinvention was designed to create that community. And Greg has reminded of us.
Greg's a case study in this because if you'll remember, I mean, Greg tells the story, but the whole reason we even came to know Greg, we being the Pure Reinvention group, is because Jody Parker, who was another sort of ancillary connection for the Pure Reinvention family, but a personal friend of mine, went on the We Invent bus trip. And she went on that trip as a favor to me, not expecting to have any sort of great awakening or awareness or shift, but that's exactly what happened. And she was so struck by it that she couldn't stop talking about it. And Greg happened to be one of her coworkers at the time. And so her talking about it got him excited about it and got him connected with us. It's just the way it works.
And so that brings up the whole next part that Greg talked about, and that it was once you build a certain momentum, the conversation starts to sell itself. Other people who are a part of the community start to positively sell your concept. And I think there's a perfect example that you just mentioned, Jody, where now we have people who are starting to participate in the Pure Reinvention activities that are going on, who are now reaching out to their networks who may be disruptors or who may be looking for something similar, and the momentum starts to build.
Yep, and that's the whole power behind the social aspect of it, is that you're not limited by geography, that you can have these conversations and you can make these connections virtually and they can still be impactful. And so Greg had reminded us, regionally, at the statewide level, nationally, and globally. And how exciting is it to think that this concept of disruption and not disruption for the sake of disruption, but because we want what's next, that would be happening at a global scale. And it is. So how cool that we can all tap into that.
And as Greg has reminded, for him, and I think for many people who are a part of kind of this new generation of thought, connecting for them can be just as powerful if it's virtual as opposed to if it's face-to-face. And the power of virtual connectivity, which is the social media kind of aspect of building community, that power of connecting people so that they don't feel like they're alone is essentially the platform for social media, and allows those people in any location to take advantage of a message of Greg, who's sitting talking about Pure Reinvention, but people around the world start to listen to that message. What power that has.
Absolutely.
So if you're ready for a change, make it a change that lasts. Make it Pure Reinvention.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Pure Reinvention. Keep the conversation going and get alerts when new podcasts are up by following us on Twitter at Pure Reinvention or sign up for our mailing list at purereinvention.com.